Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gita Mary and this is my Impact series, and today's video is about tourism. I want to take a little bit of a closer look as to what kind of aspects of tourism is actually the most impactful and how, furthermore, and I guess most importantly, we can improve those aspects. And how we can become better tourists, or how we can become better travelers, etc. Anyway, let's do this. Let's dive in. Get it? Tourism, scuba diving. Anyway, and of course we cannot start this impact analysis without looking at the history. It's no secret that humans have moved around the planet for as long as humans have been on the planet. But the concept of traveling for leisure or for pleasure or because we just feel like it is a rather new concept. Actually, we can see aspects of tourism or traveling for pleasure as far back as the antiquity, but that kind of tourism is a lot different from what we think about today. The early stages of modern tourism can be traced back to the 17th century. During the 17th century, it was common for nobles and really rich people to embark on the Grand Tour. The Grand Tour was supposed to be an educational journey a lot of young people took to get acquainted with culture and music and art and overall have different experiences. The Grand Tour was a journey through typically Germany, France, Italy and Greece. Mind you, this is incredibly Eurocentric and from the perspective of travelers from Europe. By the 18th century, it was pretty common for wealthy people to go on bigger journeys, bigger trips, and that also extended to North America. And from there, it didn't take very long until traveling or tourism evolved into pilgrimages and missionary work, which is a nicer way of saying that a lot of rich white people went out into the world and bothered indigenous people. Mildly put. Offensively mild. All of this was made possible by the Industrial Revolution. During this period, we saw huge advancements both in the economic, the social, and the technological sector. We saw new social classes and new means of transportation. And more people plus more money equals wanderlust, as they say. In the beginning of the 19th century, we saw the first travel agencies, and that made it easier for people to book trips because we could suddenly gather everything about tickets, accommodation, food. Everything related to your travels could be made in a single place, and that meant that more people were able to book trips and more people were able to go on them, and as such more people did. In the 20th century, we saw mass production of buses and cars and advancement in air travel, and that, oh boy, did that make the tourism industry. These developments, along with labor legislation and more social welfare, meant that more people had more time on their hands and more money on their hands, and as such, more free time to go on vacation. And now they suddenly also had the proper means of transportation to getting around, and as such, people wanted to go on vacation. After World War II, there was a sudden spike in the tourist industry. I wonder why, and especially coastal destinations became really popular. All of this led to the tourist industry we know today. In 1950, there were recorded 25 million annual tourist arrivals. In 1970, that number was 166 million. And by 1990, that number had grown to 435 million annual tourist arrivals. And since the 90s, that number has tripled. Today, more than 1.4 billion tourists arrive at the destination every year. And by 2030, it's predicted that 1.8 billion tourists will be arriving at their destination. So what's the impact? The tourism industry accounts for about 8% of global emissions, which is a lot. Airplanes as a whole account for about 2.5% of global emissions. And about 5% of global warming is caused by water vapor trails from airplanes, but that's different. They do overlap, but they're two different statistics. But 8% is massive. According to Sustainable Travel International, 49% of emissions related to tourism comes from transportation. 12% comes from purchasable goods, 10% comes from food and beverages, 8% is agriculture, 8% is services, 6% is lodging, and another 6% is construction and mining, and then there is 1% of other aspects that are not disclosed. My guess? Snow globes. With airfare becoming more affordable and available to more people are flying, and we can actually see a 60% increase in tourists since 2006 because of aviation. The aviation industry undeniably has a huge impact on the planet. It emits about 2.5% of all emissions. However, 80% of the world's population do not fly at all. So that impact comes from a minority of the human population. And when talking about aviation, I cannot really not mention private jets. Not that a lot of private jet owners watch my videos, I sincerely doubt it, but a private jet on average has an impact that is 14 times higher than that of a commercial jet. But now you're probably wondering, is air travel the most unsustainable, most polluting means of transportation? Well, actually it isn't. There is something way worse. Even the most sustainable and fuel-efficient cruise ship has an impact that on average is 3 to 4 times higher than any commercial jet. Cruise ships with swimming pools and roller coasters and skating rinks and malls can be as long as 3 football fields and carry thousands of passengers. One cruise ship can burn through about 350 tons of fuel in a day, and in a day emit the same as about 12,000 cars. When you combine the impact of flying to a hotel and staying in the hotel and generally partaking in activities that would make sense on vacation, that is still less impactful than going on a cruise. To the impact of cruises, except from fuel, also comes the massive amount of water waste, resource waste, food waste, etc. The tourist industry often puts pressure on natural resources, and this is especially true in areas where resources are already pretty scarce. This pressure includes pollution from wastewater management issues as well as freshwater depletion. And when speaking of water use in tourism, there's only really one way we can go from here: golf courses. An average golf course in a tropical country uses as much water as 60,000 village inhabitants. Moreover, it also uses an average of 1,500 kilos of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides every single year. Forests and natural areas are destroyed to make room for big, extravagant lawns as well as golf courses, and this disturbs ecosystems and completely disrupts biodiversity. The tourism industry also see overconsumption of water as an effect of hotels and swimming pools and personal water use by tourists. Studies find that tourists has a tendency of using a lot more resources when they are not at home. On holiday, tourists can use up to 440 liters of water per day. And this is especially an issue because a lot of very popular tourist destinations actually experience droughts and water scarcity. Areas and especially cities that are affected by large amounts of tourists also experience a strained relationship between the locals and the tourists. Because when an area, and especially an urban area, experience a large influx of tourists, that often push out all local residents because those neighborhoods are now becoming too expensive for the local residents to live in. As such, the authenticity that a lot of tourists are actually visiting famous destinations for won't actually exist when they arrive there. Tragic in and of itself, but also a little bit of a microcosm of capitalism. At least the authenticity that a lot of tourists are looking for will cease to exist because that authenticity no longer has the means and budget to live in that area, and as such it kind of stops being authentic. When smaller local businesses are pushed out of neighborhoods and the only ones that can really afford to stay are bigger international chains. And this is such a widespread phenomenon that it has a name. It's the Airbnb effect. At popular urban tourist destinations, hosts are converting long-term rentals that previously housed local residents and families into short-term rentals for tourists. This doesn't happen just a teeny tiny bit, this happens on a massive global scale. In 2020, vacation home purchases exceeded the growth of existing home sales by 44% from the year prior. And you would think that when you rent an apartment or a room through Airbnb, that money is going into the community you're staying in, right? Right? Well, that isn't what's happening at all. The majority of the revenue generated via Airbnb is actually shared by a small pool of stakeholders. 25% of hosts on Airbnb run about 66% of all the listings. And these stakeholders take entire apartment buildings and turn them into de facto hotels because in the long haul, it's a lot more profitable to create short-term housing for tourists than it is to house local residents full-time. As such, the locals don't have any place to live and they have to move out of the city. It's officially that time of year where I have to turn on my ring light, and low-key, I'm sad about that. I don't like this light as much, so that's why I don't usually turn it on. But I can see that I guess it probably creates a better experience for everybody. Anyway, did you know that around 80% of the world's tourists visit the same 10% of the world's destinations? We want to see the same famous sites, and that creates crowds. Overtourism is a big issue in terms of natural resources because very few places are built for extreme crowds, especially when those places are naturally occurring. But it's not only in nature that we see a lot of these issues. In cities, we have wastewater management issues, sewage issues, general architectural decay, lacking infrastructure, and air pollution from the dense concentration of people suddenly there. Maya Bay in Thailand was made famous by the movie The Beach and saw approximately 2.5 million visitors in 2018, and averaged roughly 4,000 visitors a day. The crowds and the boats visiting the bay destroyed around 80% of the naturally occurring coral reef, which killed off basically all biodiversity in the area. As a result, Thailand's Department of Natural Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation closed the site to tourists to make it possible for nature to bounce back. It has since reopened, but with a lot of restrictions that make it easier to protect and prevent future damage to the same extent. This hasn't only happened in Maya Bay, it has happened at dozens, countless popular tourist destinations. Another example of a site that has struggled with overtourism for decades is the Machu Picchu. It's almost like this ancient Incan site wasn't designed for 1.4 million visitors every single year. In 2016, UNESCO put the Machu Picchu on the list of World Heritage Sites in danger. When it comes to ancient ruins and significant cultural landmarks, it's almost like a lot of tourists don't have the same respect towards it and know how to treat it right because they don't have an actual affiliation with it. As such, a lot of tourists tend to treat these sites like their playgrounds, which destroys them. The Croatian city of Dubrovnik and its surrounding environment is heavily impacted by cruise ships. In 2016, the city saw a whopping 529 ships with almost 1 million passengers. Old Town in the city is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and that site is simply not made for that kind of activity. So as of 2019, only 2 cruise ships are allowed per day, and we see similar problems in Venice in Italy and Santorini in Greece, etc., etc. So many places all over the world. Another example, but Bali's famous beaches are being covered under 60 tons of plastic waste. And according to Bali's tourism ministry, the pressing issue regarding the polluted beaches is directly related to overtourism and poor waste management systems that simply isn't designed for an additional 5.7 million visitors every year. It's being washed up on Bali's beaches, yes, but it's actually more so a symptom of the global plastic waste pollution crisis that we're seeing in our oceans today. So I hope you guys are ready for about 25 ways of reducing your impact while you're traveling, how to become a more sustainable and ethical tourist. Let's do this. Use a local guide from the local area whenever you're exploring, especially natural areas. They know where to go and where not to go, and they know how to take proper care of the environment you're in. Stick to the path. Generally, don't go wander off into bushes and natural areas, disturbing biodiversity, disturbing animals, flora and fauna. Be respectful of the environment that you're in and don't trample down anything. If we love wild nature, we should also partake in protecting it. Slow down and stay in an area for more than one night. When tourists jump from place to place to place constantly in a very fast pace, we often end up not really supporting the local community or the local economy. So staying a few more nights might actually be really beneficial and also means less travel emissions. Now, we sort of touched base on this already, but I want to really make it clear. Respect natural areas and sites, always. Which means no jumping up on things we shouldn't be jumping on, and not taking things that doesn't belong to us or doesn't belong in our local community or in our local flora and fauna that isn't a part of our biodiversity. Don't bring things home that doesn't belong where you live. And just, overall, be conscious and respectful about the natural biodiversity that exists where you are. And on that note, also be respectful of local cultures and customs and act accordingly. Research what sort of the do's and don'ts and respect those when you're visiting other places. This is very basic stuff. Let's be real. However, I don't really think I could make a video about sustainable travel or about the impact of tourism without also talking about these things. Buy locally produced or sourced souvenirs. There are a plethora unsustainably and unethically produced souvenirs wherever you go. Wherever we look, we can find the same things. I can find the same snow globe produced from the same place anywhere in the world because they're made in one factory and shipped out into the rest of the world, but that's not really fun now, is it? Instead, support local communities by buying things that are actually produced in the area that you're in, and as such support local artists and musicians by buying their products. You can also support natural or environmental conservation projects in the area that you're visiting. Now, I didn't really touch base on this within the impact analysis, but I want to talk about it here. Avoid all kinds of animal exploitative activities and attractions. Anywhere where you can pet a tiger or ride an elephant or see an orchid jump through a hoop. No, baby, no. If you want to avoid adding to the crowd with your tourism, or if you want to avoid adding to the over-tourism factor, visit your destination in the off-season instead. Also, experience local cuisine instead of expecting everything to be like you know it from home. Depending on foods that are roughly identical to the things that you know from home often means larger supply chains, supporting big international chains rather than small businesses. Eating more local cuisine will often mean that you're eating more seasonally, and that will mean that it's often more sustainable. So, you know, of course there can be many reasons as to why you can't fully immerse yourself into the local cuisine. You can have dietary restrictions, you can have allergies, etc. But trying to, or being mindful of what's happening and what sort of foods you're seeking out, no matter the extent to which you can actually do it, is a really good idea. Before leaving for your destination, you can also research if that place is affected by over-tourism. And based on those findings, you can choose destinations that are a lot less crowded. Learn about the local recycling systems at your destination and consume materials that can actually be locally recycled. I have said this throughout the video as well, but support local businesses rather than big international chains that don't actually pay taxes in the country that they're represented in. Okay, a small thing, but bring reusables so you don't have to use unnecessary disposable products. I always tell myself this whenever I'm traveling, but make sure you're consuming resources like you would in your own house. With that mentality, you will automatically save a lot of water, heat, power, etc. Fuel. If you want to avoid food waste, it can be a really good idea to avoid all-you-can-eat establishments as well as any kind of buffet, and go for a table service where there is a portion designed for you. You can also bring a container for your leftovers, which I love to do, but overall avoiding buffets will also reduce the amount of food waste and the impact of that is related to your visit. Boycott cruise ships altogether. Just heck them. Burn them all. Don't go on cruises. Don't be annoyed or angry if a destination or an attraction that you have been looking forward to isn't accepting any more visitors that day. That usually just means that that attraction has set some limitations as to how many people can visit in a day or in a year, etc. So if you want to make really sure that you are going to get in, buy your tickets from home, but don't give the people at the attraction or at the destination a hard time, because what they're doing is actually really important and a really, really good thing, even though it might feel annoying in the situation. But there's a good reason behind it. When looking for hotels, you can find more sustainable hotels, for instance, hotels that are certified with the Green Key certification. If you're looking for plant-based food options or generally more sustainable food options, the app Happy Cow is an absolute lifesaver. Even if you're not a vegan or vegetarian, eating a primarily plant-based diet whenever you're traveling is no effort on your part, because you don't have to cook anything, you don't have to learn anything new, but you will get more low-impact food. Use public transportation as buses, trains, etc. as much as you can, and avoid using taxis. And obviously, and this has to be said, but choose destinations, if you can, when you can, that doesn't require you to fly there. Depend on trains and buses, etc. instead. That will automatically lower the impact of your travels by a whole lot. If you have to fly, don't choose first class. The more space each individual passenger has on the plane, the higher the impact. And of course, don't choose the private jet. I don't really think there are anyone that has that option available to them watching my videos, but if there is, you suck. And yes, that does include Taylor Swift as well. Like her music, but goddamn those emissions. And if you have to fly, it's better to choose a one flight destination rather than having layovers or having to change flights, because it's often takeoff and landing that actually require a lot of resources and a lot of fuel. So if you can avoid those and only need to do like one thing rather than doing like 3 ones, it's gonna be better as well. And that was 25 sustainable travel tips, as well as an overall analysis of some of the impacts related to tourism and over-tourism. I hope that you liked this video. If you did, leave me a thumbs up. That would make my day. Also, leave me a comment down below and tell me if there are any aspects that I missed regarding the impact of tourism, because then I can definitely make a part 2. Or let me know if there are any other aspects, concepts, products or materials that you would like for me to include in the impact analysis series. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day, and remember to take really good care of yourselves. Until next time, bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!